Charles Purcell presents
The New Archetype. I've noticed recently a new archetype on the American landscape. You know what an archetype is, right? It's a particular type of person or idea in culture or in literature, kind of a shorthand for describing a kind of person with a set of particular behaviors and beliefs. For example, the hero, that's an archetype. The self-appointed guru, the everyman, the angry young man. And the archetype takes hold in the culture at a particular time and place and helps to define that culture. Well, I've discovered a new archetype, and I call it the Goobermensch, after Nietzsche's Übermensch, which means the overman or the superman or the new man. But goober, because they're not that serious. They're kind of silly. They're kind of laughable in a very serious way, and I'll get to that. So not Übermensch, but Goobermensch. That's what I'm calling the new archetype. I got to thinking about this with the news of opinion writer Bari Weiss, founder of the Free Press, and she was named as head of CBS News, to the horror of anyone with any sense. Because Bari Weiss has zero experience heading up a newsroom. In fact, she has zero experience as a journalist. She's never been anything but a loudmouth pundit, which in and of itself is not a bad thing. I like loudmouth pundits. I like people with opinions. She's not a journalist by any stretch of the imagination. And she's been named the head of CBS News. And that's one of the defining characteristics of this new archetype I'm noticing, or claiming. Bari Weiss fits perfectly into this new category of independent influencers, podcasters, comedians, journalists. And amateurism, being an amateur, is absolutely central to the definition of what I'm talking about. Opinion writers becoming not only journalists, but heading up whole news departments of a major news network. Comedians being pundits. A conspiracy theorist is now head of Health and Human Services. A weekend Fox host is now Secretary of Defense. And there's a whole roster of hundreds of the aforementioned podcasters, pundits, comedians, and so-called journalists. And they all, quote, do their own research. No, they're not trained in the position that they've been hired for or the one they've simply just claimed for themselves. They've just decided they know how to do it better than the experts. It's like the football fan who's convinced he's smarter than the coach. The Goobermensch is a product of fractured media, social media, but mostly a product of profit. None of them would be where they are without the clicks and the likes and ringing that bell for notifications. They find their way into the media landscape and beyond, in the case of people like Pete Hegseth and many others who found themselves in actual halls of power. Bari Weiss, the person I started with. None of them would be where they are without their ability to exploit the profit system. This new archetype, the Goobermensch, is smug, is certain. They have a monopoly on common sense. They are uncompromising. They don't apologize. No, never apologize. And they are decidedly masculine, regardless of their gender. We even see this on an international level. The Goobermensch archetype has creeped into foreign policy. It's all transactional, and it's conducted by amateurs with money. Elon Musk bought his way into Starlink, so suddenly he's got something to say about Ukraine defending themselves against the Russian invasion and having a good deal of power over whether or not they succeed. Amateurs with money. The perfect example, the so-called peace plan in Gaza and the underlying Abraham Accords. It's all transactional because the amateurs at the center of it are real estate developers pretending to be diplomats. They are the Goobermensch. The fact that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are amateur diplomats was actually defended by Vice President J.D. Vance, who called it a new way. The president himself is the ultimate Goobermensch, an amateur, a kind of idiot. It's all transactional. His use of tariffs as weapons of international diplomacy, jerking around NATO, jerking around Ukraine, cozying up with Putin, befriending Syria and Argentina. It's all 100% personal. It's all 100% transactional. It's all cynical. It's all based on perceived strength, masculine strength, power to make deals. This is the new archetype, self-serving amateurs. Absolutely, at its core, right wing. Extreme right wing in its emphasis on individualism, on the cowboy ethos. Extreme right wing in its disrespect, its hatred, really, its disdain for democracy, for equity. So we see this new archetype manifesting itself around the globe. But let's bring it back here to our shores and to these individuals. Racism, misogyny, homophobia are ascendant in the Goobermensch, all in the name of colorblindness. They twist Martin Luther King's content of character, quote, to justify dominant power relationships, to reject equity, while simultaneously giving lip service to equality. So they use this so-called colorblindness to hide their racism, or in a kind of final weird irony, to actually defend their racism. It's cool all of a sudden. Remember, one of Elon Musk's dodgy boys posted, "I was racist before it was cool." Yeah, that's what the Goobermensch believes, that racism is cool, or it's edgy. Which, by the way, side note, that's the exact word, edgy, that J.D. Vance used when he was asked about the young Republicans' racist, misogynist, and Hitler-loving Telegram chat, which came out in the news recently. Yeah, J.D. Vance said, "Oh, they were just being edgy." J.D. Vance is perhaps the most dangerous man on the planet right now. This new archetype, the Goobermensch, has solved the paradox of tolerance. They've solved it in their minds. You know the paradox, right? I'm tolerant of all things, except intolerance. That's the paradox. Well, the right-winger says, the Goobermensch says, if you were really tolerant, you would be tolerant of my intolerance. They haven't got the brain power to understand what a paradox is. They just have decided to solve it. If you ever took Philosophy 101 in college, you know that one guy who wouldn't shut up, who wouldn't accept a premise, who just decided that he had the answer to a paradox that's been puzzling mankind for 1,000 years. But yeah, the sophomore tight end in the back row, he's got the answer. Thanks. So yeah, the Goobermensch says you can be tolerant of intolerance. Well, except when you're not. Because for them, rules are made up on the spot, and they change on a whim at their convenience. The Goobermensch maintains the right to criticize anyone at all about anything. They've created the ultimate loophole for themselves. Because anything can be true, everything can be true, nothing can be true. They've given themselves a get-out-of-jail-free card, an all-access, all-inclusive plan to do and say whatever the hell they want. because they're free thinkers. All this while they condemn and deride anyone who dares to question them. Their tolerance only goes so far. They're the first to cry about free speech. Oh, don't take away my free speech, while they accuse others of so-called incendiary language. You can't call Stephen Miller a Nazi. I don't care if he quotes Nazi propaganda verbatim. In fact, they have an answer to every critique possible because they make their own rules all the time about everything. It's pure absurdist nihilism. Self-styled Nietzsche's Übermensch, and that's why they are Goobermensch. And this worldview, which seems to be very much in vogue right now, the aforementioned Barry Weiss, comedian Bill Maher, NFL quarterback Aaron Rodgers, it holds a particular appeal to young people. Not only young people, but they really seem to be gravitating towards it. It's cool, if that's still a word. Is that still a word? It's cool to be libertarian, to claim nonconformity and individualism. Everyone is free to do you. You do you. It's very appealing, isn't it? Even if that means being a misogynist and a bigot, you do you. It's more than both sidesism. It's all sidesism. Another defining characteristic of the Goobermensch is being contradictory to your team. So, again, Barry Weiss denies vehemently that she's right-wing or fascist. How could she be? She's a lesbian. I think she's married. Bill Maher, self-proclaimed liberal, belching out his anti-woke propaganda. Josh Fetterman, man of the people. Ezra Klein, left-wing columnist for the New York Times, with his praise of Charlie Kirk and the madness of his abundance philosophy. Yeah, but they're all being contrarian to their assigned team. They see it as a badge of honor, claiming to be a free thinker, to be independent. And as I started with, they reject expertise, central to the Übermensch ethos. Reject expertise. They cynically reject academia. Nobody is harder on universities and university professors than Bill Maher. They take pride in their own ignorance. I'm talking to you, Joe Rogan. And they have no shame in their unbridled love of power. Self-serving opportunism. The new archetype can be charming. They often are. They can slip in and out of different communities and identities very easily. They can and often do sound very reasonable, very educated, knowledgeable. They can be very convincing, and their message is tempting. It appears to be self-empowering, this message. I understand the appeal. Plus, as an adherent to this philosophy, you're instantly absolved of all responsibility. If everyone can succeed by their own efforts as individuals, and that's at the heart of the Übermensch, individualism, well, then how is it your business to help those who are failing? Well, it's obviously their fault. Don't worry about others. The new archetype believes that empathy is the greatest sin. They say it out loud. I've just quoted them. So, don't worry about others. In fact, you do more harm than good. You can't complain about racism. That's actually the cause of racism now. Did you know? Oh, yeah. That's what the Übermensch has taught us. Racism isn't caused by racists. No. It's not caused by racist policies or the residue of 400 years of racist history. No, racism is caused by us do-gooders talking about racism. Now, my world of the old left is just a joke to them. Righteous concern for the greater good. empathy for others, the call for social justice, fighting for the rights of the marginalized, the poor, the children of war, all the victims of the world. But now there are no victims, only the power of individual will. The New Age version of pull yourself up by your own psychic bootstraps. This idea has been around since the New Age movement of the 1970s. It's taken several iterations since, and now this time with a Nazi nihilist twist. The new archetype, the Goobermensch, is steeped in Uncle Tomism. As long as the individual benefits with either fame or money or attention, which is the coin of the realm these days, well, what else could matter? To care about the marginalized is to practice the sin of identity politics. We can't do that. Very happy to join the oppressors if it gets me fame, money, or attention. Especially since there's no such thing as an oppressor in the mind of the Goobermensch. This new archetype is either the product of fascism or the precursor, the facilitator of fascism. I'm not sure which. Either way, it's the tailor-made perfect conduit for ushering in a full fascist victory. Because they're isolated, they're individualistic, they're cynical, they're anti-intellectual, and they're self-serving. The old guard left is the opposite, the absolute opposite of the new archetype. And trust me, I am fully aware of my OG status. So I'm being very careful to not sound like a fossil, not to just hold my fist up in the air and say, oh, kids these days. Yeah, we social justice warriors are dismissed as naive, as do-gooders, as tree huggers, as aging hippies. We're the jokes. We're the ones being laughed at, insulted. Our whole worldview rejected in its entirety. The Goobermensch claims independence from the old right-left political divide. And there is some merit to that. That's where I'm going to agree. Too much attention on the right-left divide. The real divide is up and down. The haves, the have-nots, the 1% and the 99%. Of course, they reject that too, because they love the whole money thing. For all of their many incarnations, that's one thing they absolutely share. They love the money. And as I alluded to earlier, they love to criticize both sides. And many of the Übermensch do indeed come from the left. That's what makes this so kind of new and interesting. But the whole movement is decidedly, unmistakably right-wing. If there's any left in them, as in the left, it's in their rhetorical defense, at least, of diversity. But those are just words. Without affirmative and intentional policy to protect the rights of minorities, of marginalized folks, then that's what they remain, just words. Empty words. Not only empty, but dangerous. Words that create cynicism and nihilism in the culture. If all responsibilities fall on the shoulders of the individual, if you deny that oppression even exists, if you work night and day to gain favor and succeed in the world of the oppressors, which you don't recognize, what is that but Uncle Tom? Any woman, any LGBTQ person, any person of color that buys into the Übermensch philosophy is an Uncle Tom. And so then it's just a victory for the billionaires and the bigots. Barry Weiss is a lesbian. Okay. Bill Maher is a self-described liberal. By the way, it's hilarious how he has absolutely no awareness of how boomer that sounds. Fetterman is a man of the people with common sense. RFK is a crank and a conspiracy theorist. Joe Rogan is just asking questions. You might ask, do they believe their own shtick? See, I don't think so. I think they're opportunists who fear losing their money and position more than they love the people. Now, I could be a little more generous. Maybe they're blinded by their own fear. Maybe their status as one of the good ones gives them comfort. Maybe they're more victim than villain. But who knows? Maybe they really are true believers. Maybe Candace Owens honestly believes that any little black girl from the projects can grow up to be Oprah. I could give them the benefit of the doubt, I suppose, but how can they really believe this stuff? It's hard to believe anyone could be that stupid. The world they're building is a hot mess. Science and expertise of all kinds, knowledge, best practices, lessons of history, all of it pushed to the sidelines. For the freedom to spout off, to make a buck, to get the clicks, to be free. The concept of liberty, as in libertarian, is cynically exploited for personal gain. I mean, what chances have we got to meet the challenges of the environment? Global warming, microplastics in every blood cell, islands of garbage floating in the ocean, mountains of consumer waste along miles of shoreline. What chances have we got to meet the challenges of socioeconomics? What about children growing up without parents who are always working, or growing up without a proper house, apartment, or a safe neighborhood? Poverty and abuse faced by half of the world's population because of runaway consumerism from the other half of the population. Combine that with runaway technology to create an exponentially accelerating runaway train of social and environmental destruction. AI is creating an impossible need for electricity, for fresh water that will drive us to ruin. But the new model, the world of the new archetype of the Goobermensch, has only short-term individual interests. The next generation be damned, let alone the next 7 generations. That's old school. That's old-fashioned. Okay, hippie. Okay, boomer. And it's not that I want to go back to some mythical time when we were on the right track, though I will defend, if you want to debate me on it, the mid-century progress, the advances in civil rights, the environment, governmental reform. That was an archetype. The lefty, the social justice warrior, Bernie frickin' Sanders. But compare that to the new archetype: radical individualism, anti-intellectualism, rejection of science and expertise, embrace of conspiracies, doing your own research, ignorance of civics, of history, at best a cursory headline knowledge of current affairs. The new archetype, the Goobermensch. Now the bad news is they seem to be growing. There's more and more of them everywhere you look. Even worse news, they seem to be taking over. They're in the halls of power. But here's the good news. They haven't fully taken over yet. It's still a project that can be stopped. They're still outnumbered, at least for the time being. Look, Bernie is still the most popular politician in America. Zoran Mamdani of New York is going to be mayor, and his popularity is soaring, to the chagrin of both Republicans and Democrats. You and I always talk about the polls that have universal health care, gun control, tax the rich, etc., up in the 70, 80, 90%. So that's the good news. That's the bottom line. We can stop them. We still have time to stop them. Because we have to face the reality of our challenges. Artificial intelligence, climate crisis, education, healthcare, housing, journalism, social media, government reform. None of these issues can be solved by the Übermensch. In fact, each of them will only be exacerbated. We have to reject the new archetype in order to renew community, to embrace science, best practices. They have no answers for any of these problems, at least none that could be taken seriously. Half of them they deny are even problems. Now, if you know me at all, if you've listened to any of my programs, you know that I'm not suggesting old school Democratic Party style regulations, public-private initiatives with incentives. No. Any solution going forward has to be revolutionary. Eliminate the power of money and profit. I'd like to abolish them entirely, but certainly get them out of politics, out of the media. Can have paid influencers. Billionaires, they need to be taxed out of existence. For-profit algorithms need to be banished from the earth. For-profit media has to be banished from the earth. Yeah, no more race to the bottom, which is all that profit does. Journalists need to do journalism. Scientists need to do science. Artists need to do art. Educators need to teach. Writers write, etc., etc. The dominance, the central role of money and profit has created the Goobermensch, and turning away from money and profit can do away with the Goobermensch. So I urge you to be conscious. Don't be seduced and one day wake up to find that you're one of them. Because that's how culture works. We slide into it unwittingly, silently. We assimilate naturally, subconsciously to the forces around us. That's just how the world works. It takes real effort to resist that. It takes a conscious effort to go in a different direction. To be openly pro-academia right now, pro-expertise, even pro-democracy, in many circles, you'll be ostracized for that. Those ideas are on the ropes in many places. But we still can right the ship without reversing it. I'm not for going back. I am for going forward with intellect, with empathy. Those are values we have to hold on to. Those are values we can take forward. This episode of Charles Purcell Presents is available right now wherever you find your podcasts, or go to the website charlespurcell.com for the full archive and all the other series in the podcast family. Follow me on Blue Sky and Substack. Write to me at charlespurcell@gmail. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio, riverwestradio.com. Theme music composed and performed by Peter Donalds. From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell.